My mother was the most beautiful girl in the world. Long curly hair, dark smouldering eyes, and a wicked smile. She used to ride a sleek black Suzuki, and she'd always wear this tatty red dress, all oily from the bike. All the men chased her and all the women wanted to be her. She was such a wild child. She was bold and fearless and free. You should have heard the stories. She'd go out after midnight, dancing and swimming in the fountains. She'd disappear for days at a time. We'd later find out she'd been on a random adventure with some complete stranger. And the times when she'd go to work dressed in her plain work clothes and she'd come back home wearing the most beautiful dresses with sparkling jewels dripping from her neck and fingers. But she sparkled far more than any jewel. In a certain mood, she was magnetic. She had this way of just walking into a room and immediately bringing it to life. Everybody loved her. And I could always see why, because when she smiled, she shone like the sun. But then something happened to that girl who was so full of light. As the seasons changed, so did her moods, and the light inside her, it withered away and eventually became something far more unpredictable, something far uglier. It was all tired eyes and sad smiles. She seemed haunted by something. She'd always look off into the distance as if she was frightened, but it was something that no one else could see. She thought that she'd be able to hide herself away. She used to lock herself in her room for hours at a time, as if it would make us not notice what was happening to her. And I sat for hours outside her room with my ear pressed to the door. I've heard her cry 1,000 times. I've heard her scream into the night when the sun is dead and the moon is full. I've seen tiny beads of blood sparkle on a dress pin and red flaking off a razor blade as if it was some grotesque gold leaf, evidence of the secrets that she keeps when the rest of the house is asleep. She tried so hard to bury the darkness inside her. She tried to drown it with drink, blind it with darkness. I knew how she sat in the dark for hours, comforted by nothingness, smothered by it. It was sometimes like she was two different people, like she was her. And then there was this poltergeist or this monster that would somehow inhabit her body, make her rage, make her say things that she couldn't possibly have meant. But I've honestly never met anyone with a purer heart than my mother's. She loved me so strongly, so intensely, more so than anyone else ever has in my entire life. I have so few unblemished, pure memories of her. where she was selfless and loving and kind. And one, I always remember it was a school night, and all the other kids had been teasing me. I'd fallen out with a friend, I couldn't sleep, and I just sat in my bed, spending the whole night crying. I thought nobody would notice. But she came in. And it was one of her good days. She was all nicely made up, and she smelt of perfume and not of whiskey. She came in my room and she tucked me in. If you wouldn't mind. Thank you. And she stroked my hair, and she wiped away my tears, and she gave me this. I'd seen it in a shop window, but my father said no. It was far too expensive. But she must have snuck out and got it, and he didn't know. The one realization I had from this moment when I was much older was that when I'd seen the toy, it had been weeks ago, and she'd waited. She'd got it and held on to it and waited until the moment that it would have meant the most to me, and that was when she gave it to me. And I always loved her when she was like that. It was almost like a glimpse of who she was before. Before she was taken over by her demons, taken over by the drink and the pressure and the denial. It's so hard for me to think of the same woman who gave me that teddy, to think of her as the terrible force of negativity that tornadoed around our house. We were always walking on eggshells, almost daring to breathe. It's almost like she was two different people, and I just can't reconcile them with each other. I suppose it's because she's my mother, but you know, there's people that you love, unconditionally love, and it made me never want to give up, because I had these memories, just like this one, that were like shining white pearls at the bottom of an ocean full of guilt. Under all that horror, I knew there was the girl who used to ride her bike and dance in the moonlight. I always wondered what it would have been like to have known her then. The way that she was before. I think we would have liked each other. I think we would have been friends. I wish we could just choose memories. The way that you select photos to go in an album. I wish I could just cut out all the bad and only keep the perfect shining examples of the woman that I loved. eventually all this was too much for my dad, and she left for good. And in a way it was a relief, because there was nothing there that I admired anymore. But I still think about her. I still think about her an awful lot. And sometimes I just wish I could forget about her. That's it. Thank you.